encouraging her to continue. But she shook her head. He soured his face, a look she knew all too well, one that equated to nothing good. "I won't tell you twice." She sighed. "It's just that I can't wait for you to come back and see me," she finished. She might be a terrible liar, but she watched as his face softened. He smiled and nodded, leaning in to kiss her. She met his lips, tasted the bitter metal that she never got used to, always wondering how he had, and let their tongues meet. The thing was, it wasn't a lie. She just wished she would be able to see his face when he came back. But then she couldn't hold it back anymore and felt a tear run down her face. It traced over their lips, adding a salty taste to the bitterness, and he pulled back. "Don't be afraid," he said, his voice soft and comforting. "It's okay. I've cared for you, shown you that you are meant to be with me. You may not think it, but you are worthy. You know that, right? Being in my presence is intimidating, but my word is truth." She sniffled and wiped her face. "Yeah," she said. He smiled. "Good," he said, wiping his thumb across her cheek. "I'll bring back some of those ribs you like. How's that sound?" "That'd be real good," she answered. He stared into her eyes for a moment, and this time she could see straight into him. The real joy he felt. He might think himself powerful, but he was just as broken as she was, if not more. "I won't be long," he said, then paused a moment, letting his bottom lip fidget against his sharp upper teeth. "It might be time for us to eat together at the table. You seem ready." She smiled at the idea. Of course, it would never happen, but she wasn't going to tell him that. After all the years she'd been with him, he'd alluded to the idea of letting her upstairs, of joining him at his table, of becoming the woman he wanted her to be. But as long as she still had that little bit of who she was inside of her, he would never follow through. He went upstairs, not waiting for her to reply, taking the steps 3 at a time with his massive gait. She was grateful for that, because she didn't have it in her to respond anymore. If it was fake, it would have exhausted her trying to not be easy to read, and if it was real, she wasn't sure she could stomach what she'd become. He closed the wooden door, muffling the outside world again. She was left in the light of the single overhead bulb that swayed. To her left was the vanity table that she'd been gifted a couple years earlier. 3 globe bulbs lit up what the overhead bulb couldn't manage to reach. She let out a breath, long and slow so as to not make any noise. Not that he could hear her, but for her to be able to hear him. She needed to make sure his massive footsteps faded away until they were gone completely, out the door to the outside world that she hadn't seen in over 11 years. The door to whatever outside area that she'd never seen slammed shut, and she knew she was in the clear. It must have been the evening, if he was leaving the house so quickly. There was no time to put his hat and duster on, which covered most of his body, what he called his costume. Without it, in the daylight, she wouldn't know how he'd make it anywhere without sticking out like a sore thumb. She rushed to the vanity. In her excitement, she stumbled to the cement floor, her knees bruised from the many times she had done the same thing over the years. It wasn't noticeable, not to him, but her body was well aware. She'd learned to ignore it, just as she'd learned to do so with many other things in her current living situation. She pulled the drawer and dug her finger to the edge where a notch was made. She'd discovered it only a year earlier. She pulled up the bottom to reveal a secret compartment underneath. She shifted her weight and felt the tug on her ankle. She looked down at the shackle on her leg, the one that was attached to the chain that led to the pipe cemented to the floor. Most of the time she'd forgotten it was there. It was just another part of who she was now. It was one of the many reasons she knew she wouldn't be going upstairs to eat dinner at the table with him. That chain was never coming off, at least